Hi, welcome to the Broken Not Broke interview, the leading podcast for families impacted by childhood cancer. My name is Adrian Franco, your host and cancer dad since 2022. We know the situation is so difficult for your family right now, but I can tell you that the more information you have, the more resources you have access to, the journey will be more acceptable. And that's what we do here. If you need access to resources, you can go to brokenNotbroke.org and get information for over 400 organizations that support families like yours. We also learn about this topic, and that's the reason that today we are interviewing Geoff Rogow, the creator of After Treatment, a newsletter and website with key information for survivors and in general about cancer. We're also going to talk about housing, because when you have childhood cancer, you immediately get a financial shock. And it's important to take into consideration what's going to happen in housing decisions to make sure that the financial shock is not as acute as it could be. So let's start with the interview. Hi, welcome to Geoff Rogow, the creator and chief writer of After Treatment, a fantastic resource for all families and patients impacted by cancer. Hi, Geoff, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Really excited to be here.
So you have written extensively and candidly about your diagnosis with cancer and your experience with treatment. Can you let us know a little bit about that shock, but maybe more important, what happened after you finished treatment?
Sure. I think like a lot of cancer patients, cancer survivors, mine was very surprising. And then I've been not feeling well for a while, but I was younger, so I just assumed like I'll be fine. I think you feel invincible, and like I had been feeling pretty bad for about 5, 6 months. I'd been seeing some doctors. They had done some tests. I'd had an endoscopy and I'd stuff. And eventually I had a blood clot in my neck, got rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night. And over the course of just that evening, they did one thing that nobody had done, which is run a chest x-ray. And so they saw a massive 14 by 14 centimeter tumor in my chest. I had surgery a day later to figure out what it was. It was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I went through roughly 5 or 6 months of chemotherapy. My regimen was something called DARE-POC, and all the letters stand for something. There's an etoposide in there somewhere, that experience was shocking. It has lots of lasting scars, both physically and mentally. And I've been sort of processing it, for lack of a better word, over the past 22 years and dealing with the ramifications of what it means to have cancer. I think a lot of survivors try to run away from it. They sort of say it was something that happened to me in the past and I'm moving forward. And what I've learned myself is that you can't unrun it. So many times doors close 2, 5, 10 years after your cancer that you would never expect that door to close. And so really over the last 2 years, it became really clear to me that there's something I could do to help people, which is to build this resource that examines your life after cancer and acts as a guidebook to what are the things that are out there that can help you.
Well, I think it's a fantastic resource that you have put together, because what we have observed and talked to many survivors and parents of survivors of childhood cancer is after that moment when you finish treatment, there is a relief, but there is so much anxiety about what comes next. So tell us, when you have that experience, what are the elements you took from that experience to create After Treatment?
Sure. So I'd say the most amazing experience, or the most interesting to me, is how varied the door closing is. And so, I thought, look, there'll be some physical things and maybe there will be some financial things. But in every realm of my life, there has been a material change thanks to cancer. And so when I think about building this, and so over the last year, I've spoken to 270 doctors, financial advisors, survivors, foundation leaders, career coaches, you name it, and have put that all together. And the way I think about your life and what I'm building is in 9 places: your money, your career, physical health, mental health, family planning, your purpose, caregiving, and the sort of examination of your relationships with those around you and how that's changed. And so I've built, in essence, tools for each of those different pillars. And many of those tools are built from speaking with those directly. So the career coaches are great. There's a woman in the book, and who I've written about it, After Treatment, who is a career coach for CEOs going through cancer. And they really examine, that's an older cohort. A lot of the examination is, can I do this job anymore? Like, can I be CEO, go around the world 200 days a year, career, answer every question, be involved in this job? And many times the answer is no. Okay. For younger cancer survivors, and I've spoken with a woman in Colorado who deals with a lot of younger cancer patients and younger cancer survivors. It's about ambition. It's about what can my ambition be post cancer? Do I need to make a real shift, not in the level of my ambition, but the direction of it? If my cancer means I can't do X, maybe there's a Y I can do that's just as ambitious. Maybe she had someone who really wanted to work on Wall Street and be a trader. And so like that is an 80-hour a week thankless job. Do you have the stamina to do that for the next decade? And the answer for this woman that was coaching was no. So she pivoted to become a financial advisor that enabled it to have her ambition is the same. She wants to be a world-class financial advisor, but she understands her physical health to do the job she initially wanted wasn't there. And so in each of these chapters, I've sort of spoken with experts and those who are living it to see what they've learned, what they do over, what they love that they did. There's a woman in the book who had a real tough time after getting cancer when she was younger, moving on from her parents, that safety net of her parents. And so for her, she wasn't able to cross that bridge until she moved from Ohio to Luxembourg. Like that, she had to make that drastic a change to really feel comfortable being an adult and moving from that sort of adolescent and cancer experience to an adult who can make decisions. And she's like, I tried Boston, Boston wasn't far enough. So Luxembourg it is.
Well, what a great story. Thanks for sharing. And I think these elements these variables that you found were so important for survivors is going to be an incredibly important resource. And we're all looking forward to that book that you're writing. You mentioned financial, and the Broken Not Broke initiative specifically focuses on the financial toxicity of cancer for patients and for their families. From your perspective, how does that look for survivors at different moments of their life? And I think that what you mentioned, it was very interesting about the career coaching for CEOs versus a young person. If you have to take a similar approach, how does financial toxicity looks like?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, in the book and on the website, I spend, 30% of the time on finance. I could have written an entire book about finance. My background is behavioral economist. Like that's what I really enjoy. And along those levels, I think of financial advice and financial thinking for cancer survivors in sort of three main buckets. Bucket one is the immediate acute issue, which is you have a stack pile of bills. You have medical debt you never expected and never prepared for that's on your lap that you need to deal with. And in some cases, that is, finding the places like Broken Not Broke or many of the other people you've brought in who are there to help and navigating people to the places who can help. Some of that can be going through those bills and realizing where you were overcharged, where there's a bill that doesn't make sense. And a lot of times they're not doing it because they're bad people. A number got changed. A thing happened. I mean, Kaiser has a survey that about half people who push back on their medical bills get the bill reduced. And there are so many programs from charitable care to local nonprofits. Like these exist. You should feel no guilt using them and enabling people to do their best to tackle that debt. Part two is your medical bills are forever higher, and you need to build that into your life going forward. You are never going to be a non-doctor visit, no scan person from this point forward. I went through cancer. I had what would be one of the more easy experiences. I went through 6 months of chemo. I was put in remission. I've not had a relapse, thank God, but I still have scans. I have an autoimmune disorder because of the treatment. I have had lung issues, heart issues because of the treatment. So there is no fully clean life after. You have to acknowledge as you build your annual budgets, the cost of care is higher. And you should assess that in the places you work, the places you live, and it's part of your math. And the third thing, which is more the one I get super jazzed about with my background, is the psychology of money itself. And Morgan Housel's got this wonderful book about it. You could read The Psychology of Money for Cancer Survivors, and I would read it in a heartbeat. But the reality is, if you're a cancer survivor, you need to be able to be optimistic. You need to be able to think that you're going to live. And part of that is the way that you think about money, the way to think about these larger expenses that are part of the human experience. Buying a home. Think about the prospect of buying a home as a proxy to doing big things with money. And so for me, that examination was my wife and I, when we got to that point, we're not comfortable buying a home. It felt too much money, but we wanted to buy something. So we bought a small apartment with much less than we expect. We had set aside some money. We lowered that budget considerably and we bought a small apartment. And the reason we did was we wanted to, evaluate the benefits of the equity you can have from home, but also not burden her with potentially a larger property if something happened to me. And the upkeep of a larger home was not something physically I could handle at the time. And so, like, for us, that was the evaluation we made, which was like we were talking about before earlier, still have ambition, still have goals, still have big financial goals about buying a home, having a family, retiring, but be realistic about what you're comfortable with. And I think that goes a long way to thinking about money not as money, but money as a proxy to being the adult life you'd like to have.
Well, an interesting concept, though, the optimism or hope that you need as a survivor or as a caregiver as a survivor tied to your financial decisions. And I think is very accurate. And from our point of view at Broken Not Broke, we have seen that a lot, that after the initial financial shock is so acute, so difficult that people don't think down the road about some of those decisions. But I think that what you are pointing out is very, very important, and all families should consider.
And it's very hard. Like we have to acknowledge it's very hard. There's a woman at Cal, an economist, Eureka, who I get into the book, who examines how people spend after trauma. So after the 1920s, after World War II, after Civil War, and her examination, like that lingers for the rest of your life. So you're going to have to break human behavior to do this. Human behavior says if you get into some level of a real financial toxicity, financial hardship, it stays with you forever. And so I'm not saying the optimism is easy. I'm not saying you're going to have to go against human nature. Human nature is apathy and it's tough to make changes. This will be a material change. But I'm hoping that the more you talk about it, the more we write about it, that it can infer some change in your behavior.
I completely agree, and thanks for bringing that up. It is very important to go there in this long term or this lingering effect of financial toxicity. So, from all the conversations you have with experts, with organizations, with survivors, what are the biggest obstacles that they face? And, I'm talking specifically about finding assistance or help during those survivorship years.
I think the thing that surprises me so much is that no two people's path is the same. Every snowflake is different. It's amazing how I've talked to survivors who, the second they get through treatment, they can't wait to help a million people with cancer and they commit their lives to helping, and others who don't want to do anything with it. And that goes throughout the entire cancer experience. And so for me, it's just surprising how different and varied. And what that means is, I think the most important thing to do is a self-assessment and some regular period of time. And don't pretend you're going to do it. Do it. Put it in your calendar. Every 2 months, I'm going to say, is this working? Is my process to my life working? And if it's not, figure out the thing that's the problem and attack that problem. Don't attack all of your problems. It's going to be overwhelming. But I like this every especially in those first maybe 2 or 3 years after treatment, giving a real 8-week check-in that says, are things working for me right now? And the thing that may not be working is my relationship with my husband or wife. The thing that may not be working is my medical debt. The thing that may not be working is I physically still feel terrible. The thing that may be working is PTSD and an ability to move forward mentally. And I think you don't know what it's going to be. Don't plan out 9 months from now, 2 years from now. Every 2 months, just give real time, a half hour, an hour, to sit back and say, what is working in my life and what is not? And whatever's the main thing that's not working, come up with a plan to attack that. And then in 2 months, reassess. Did that work? Did that not work? And, for me, whatever, 20 or 13 years into this experience, it's now probably every 6 months, but I do it like clockwork. Every 6 months, I do a real evaluation. And I've done some big changes in the last 2 years, 13 years in. I left my job to start to write this book and build a resource. And I did that because things weren't working. I changed my therapist. Wasn't working. I went through some problems in October where I was having some bad scans and I didn't deal with it well. And I felt that relationship needed to change. And so you're going to have to make changes. It's really tough, but I've been able to build a system that enables it. And I make it sound like I'm making big changes. I went through 2-3 years where I didn't do anything differently. Like things were working and things were great. And I went through these periods. And sometimes your check-in's going to be like, oh, this was a good period. And the check-in can be, that was a good period. I'm gonna have a beer tonight to say like things are going okay. And sometimes it's like there's a problem here, and we need to figure out like we need to make a change. But I know that if you're predicting issues or predicting problems, you're going to be spinning your wheels a little bit. It has to be sort of a reflective. What did that last period of time look like? What was the worst part of it if there was? And can I fix that?
So let's talk about the site, the website, and obviously you're writing a book on this. How would tell survivors or caregivers of survivors, that about after treatment and what can they find there that will be helpful to their lives, like right now?
Sure. So right now at the website, I put a newsletter every week or every 2 weeks, depending on the flow. And I speak with survivors. I speak with physical therapists. I speak with career coaches, because all the people I talk about with the book. And I'm keeping each of these articles, these newsletters, which comes out every Thursday, tight to a point. So here's the issue we're tackling this week. Here's what an expert or survivor says. Here's their guide to dealing with that specific problem. And I think it's best in these buckets instead of this like larger resource. And it should be very conversational. A few weeks ago, I talked about one of the things that happened with survivors, speaking of financial toxicity, is an inability to get life insurance. Many survivors can't get life insurance. The insurance industry will tell you absolutely 5 years after cancer, you can get life insurance. In a vacuum, that's true. But the problem is most survivors have other issues that have come from the treatment or the cancer. And that's the thing. So for me, if it was just the cancer, I could probably get life insurance. But because of my autoimmune disorder, because of my lung disease, because of heart disease, which are direct reflection of my chemotherapy, I'm unable to get life insurance. So I walked through in this. I spoke with a financial advisor who builds who builds financial plans for those who can't get life insurance. So that's what it's about. You can expect that kind of weekly cadence to it. Over the next 6 months, what will be added to the website is for the book. I have workbooks. I have organizations that you should speak to on specific issues. I have this laundry list of resources that are less the newsletter and a sort of conversational thing, but more of a direct resources help. Over the next 6 months to a year, I'm going to start adding those as the book finalizes. And so you'll see a new section that'll sort of say resources for specific problems and workbooks about everything from, we've seen the power of writing and journaling. We've seen the power of building. I always say my first love is my wife and my family. My second love is probably Microsoft Excel. Like real workbooks with Microsoft Excel to walk through your medical debt in the way I examine it, to figure out where can I push back, where's there a problem, where am I being overcharged. And so you'll see those kinds of resources slowly come to the website as the book finalizes. I don't want to put it up, change it through editing, and then have it come up again. So I'm hoping over the next 6 months, you'll start seeing a lot of those.
Well, we're very excited to see those workbooks because we are missing a lot of practical applications that a survivor, a family can use immediately. There might be a lot of information. It's overwhelming. So many different opinions, so many different, ways of dealing with survivorship. But to have something that you can just take and start working on with check boxes and timelines, etc., is going to be welcome to the ecosystem. So thank you so much for having that practical vision. People just don't have the time to analyze a lot, and those resources are going to be very, very important. Let's talk about the big picture now. You have talked to so many people, and corporate America has a narrative lately, I will say, especially in the last few years, in support of cancer survivors. But in your experience, what is missing, in the everyday decisions of a workplace towards a cancer survivor?
Yeah, I mean it's tough. There's a couple things I'll say. So on the workplace itself, I think companies are doing better. I think they're doing better because of great organizations that have existed. They want a white box solution for something that can't be white boxed. And so when you talk to survivors who re-enter the workforce or are working, so much of it is prescribed to them. Here's how we're going to deal with you. Here's how we're going to plan it. And that's not what they want. They want this to be a communication. They want this to morph and change. They don't want to sort of like, here's the resource, go forth. And it just creates a burden. It feels like a one-way conversation. And it's tougher. It takes more time to meet with people individually and really come up with a plan. But if I'm talking with HR professionals right now, like take the time, build a process. It will, I worked at the Wall Street Journal for 22 years. I had opportunities to go elsewhere at different points of my life. One of the main reasons I stayed and loved it for so long was because they had a system that really worked with me. And I was very lucky. I have found that I was exceptionally lucky to have the managers I did that did that. And I could go on and thank them ad nauseum, but we don't have 2 hours. I would say the other thing that's wrong or that needs a tweak is the research industry itself. And it's something that the researchers are starting to realize as well. The way it worked for the better part of the last decade, when it got to NIH grants, when it got to getting money to fund research, the focus really was on getting the grant money and in getting the money to be able to pull things off. And the way that the product was built, that the research ended, it was to change the conversation. It was to get more money to fund cancer research. It was to get the entire country to know how that we needed prostate cancer screening at a certain level, that there was not enough money. There's so little money going into young cancer research that like we need to change people's minds. And all this research has been built to change the conversation and move the country into a direction. And I think that that's worked in a lot of ways. I think there's a reason the cancer survivor rates have escalated. I think there's a reason that prostate cancer screening is through the roof, is improved so much. Prostate and colon cancer screening. This is great. I think we've now entered a new realm of research, and the research industry needs to move a little bit, which is these survivors need more tools to be their own best advocate. The research, more money needs to go into giving people the ability to help themselves and giving people the tools to not be their own doctor, but to go into that conversation more informed, to go into the medical debt situation more informed, to go into their careers more informed. I think if you talk to some doctors and researchers at MD Anderson or University of Rochester or even at UVA, they are slowly making this shift. There's sort of this acknowledgement that like the industry itself has so been focused on advocacy and getting more money and improving the knowledge of what's out there, that it sort of lost the patient, lost the survivor with actionable advice for them to be their best advocate. And I think that's where it's failing or has failed a little bit. And I can see it shifting. So I talk to these researchers like we are making these big changes, and I think that's exciting to see that shift, especially as a survivor who wants to be more involved, who wants to have more power. I think that's really going to help the 20 million of us out there.
Well, what a great insight, from those conversations, and we have seen also the role of the patient advocate within the research community has also evolved. But I agree with you that there's still a lot of work to do to make sure that those voices are out there and really take into consideration experiences at all levels: diagnosis, treatment, survivors.
I mean, I will say, and this is, not to give my bugaboo of unhappiness, but my biggest bugaboo of unhappiness is how many patient advocate boards at hospitals are staffed by rich donors, like partners, and not by actual patient advocates and not by actual survivors. Like if I were an investigative journalist in this book, like that would be the thing that would drive me a little bit nuts. And like,
And
I do think that has changed in the last 2 or 3 years.
I have seen it too. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
definitely seen an outreach for more diverse voices at all levels, and I always advocate for the economic diversity, given what we see in financial toxicity.
Yeah.
Tell me, with this big picture conversation in terms of policies, the priorities, we have seen some interesting legislation happening recently, but you have to focus on healthcare. Public policy changes that will make a difference for cancer survivors. What would you point out?
It's a good question. I think the overwhelmingness is the problem. Like I think when you're thinking about legislation, you're thinking about policy change. You can't fix every problem. You have to figure out what's the prime concern. And I think the prime concern is the overwhelmingness of it. And I think one of the ways to help is we've put all of that burden on the social worker. We've put all of that burden on the hospital social worker, and I don't think they're as prepared for that help as they could be. I think we need more financial advocates and financial workers within the healthcare system to help be a resource for patients directly. And so I don't know the best mechanism to pull that off, but I know that if you that period, that bill, that overwhelming burden of debt, that concern about what's that next bill going to cost me, that toxicity is leading to worse health outcomes. People are sicker because of the stress of that situation. And the social workers in this country are incredible, but they are ill prepared and ill trained to be the best person to handle those things. And we need to build someone within the system that can do that. Or else, like, more people will get sicker. It is leading directly to sicker outcomes, particularly as you mentioned, particularly in more diverse communities. Like one of the like the inability to handle that is one main reason we're seeing this disparaging results and outcomes depending on where you are. Because it's, your money shouldn't determine your likelihood of surviving cancer. And often it does, not because you're not accessible to treatment, but because you're so stressed about the bills. You're so stressed about the money. So stressed about how am I going to keep a roof over my head? And like from a policy standpoint, that's where I'd love to see a lot of, and there was a lot of thought going into that. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm in, Magellan finding the new world. Like, people get it. Dr. Chino at MD Anderson, doctors throughout the country have examined this and pinpointed, and they know it's a problem. They are working their butts off to address it. And I'm thankful that smarter people than me are doing it. And this is more me saying, like, give them what they need to fix this. I see it when I speak with survivors. I see it all the time. I hear it from them. And it like, a lot of things have crushed me in this experience. And look, learning someone has a terminal diagnosis crushes me. Learning somebody is never going to get healthier. Learning someone's going to have a really tough journey crushes me. The money burden, the reality of capitalism in this particular situation really it's a very sad reality.
Well, thank you so much for that candid and comprehensive answer to this very difficult question. Anything else you want to share?
No, I just want to say thank you. Like, it's one of one of the weird things when you work for a newspaper is you can't like anything. Like, our jobs are always, if your mother says she loves you, like, double check it. We sort of have to be a regular, negative Nancy about everything. In the book reporting and in this, I can be a little more positive. Like, Adrian, I'm such a huge fan of what you're doing. I'm so proud to spend time with you and do anything to help what you're working on. And I appreciate this, but I just appreciate you and what you're doing, and I feel blessed.
Thank you so much for your time, Jeff. Well, thank you so much also for what you have created, an incredible resource that everybody needs to check immediately. We're gonna have the title, the website, so please go and visit and read all these articles and share it with anyone that you think needs to read all this information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The financial impact of childhood cancer is not going to be felt immediately, it's going to be felt in a long time. Therefore, when you have to make a decision on housing, you have to be very conservative. First of all, you just cannot afford housing close to a cancer care center that your kid needs to go, talk to your social worker. There are great organizations, foundations that can help with that. Some of them have even rooms within a hospital, like the Ronald McDonald houses in some cities. But there are many, so make sure you know what resources to use. Now, you might not be in the situation when you need to move, but you should be flexible, or you should have the flexibility in case things change. Sometimes because of relapse, or sometimes because you have to go to a clinical trial, you might have to go to some different cancer care centers, sometimes different states. That happened to my family twice. So be careful about it, try to be flexible. If you can rent, it's better. If you are thinking of buying a property, try to be conservative on that decision. Thank you for being with us today. Remember, you can find us in our socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and you can hear us at Spotify, watch us at YouTube, comment, share, like, but more important, tell people about this. Anyone who can benefit from this, it will be great if you can share this podcast. Thank you so much. See you next time. Thank you to our producer, Vanessa Toro. Bye.